Hey everybody, welcome back to another podcast of the Overwatch Project. This is episode 12, and this episode will be a continuation of episode 11. So I'm jumping right into this, so if you haven't heard episode 11, you need to go listen to that first, otherwise some of the stuff I'm talking about here may not make sense to you. So episode 11 is titled Natural Law, Cognitive Biases, and Human Problems. And now, as you know, I mentioned Mark Passio's work, and wanted to go deeper into some of the way I differ, because I think this is kind of obvious when you think about it. So Passio is big into explaining very important things like natural law. And natural law, if you can grasp that, and you can understand the fiction of authority. I mentioned 2 books, and which one of his presentations to watch to get the full picture on that. You'll understand the major problem with humans and the way our societal interactions are, and how it really is insane how crazy we are as a species on one hand, and yet how brilliant we can be as builders, engineers, and people that can invent, innovate, and improve on things that we built before, but not in the way that we form our communities. This is truly profound when you think about it. So Passio has other presentations, like one called Cosmic Abandonment, and he and I both understand the same information about the interference theory about human beings, that we are, say, a natural creation of the Creator. Okay, if you want to have a original source creator of realities and physical domain and possibly the spiritual domain, or all of it, that human beings specifically are a divergent and interfered with life form. So life is here on Earth, and it has a certain way. The planet may have been totally different at some point in our distant past. It may have had a zero tilt axis. The whole planet may have had a much different climate, and then something happened, and something created humans, and did so for a nefarious reason, possibly to make some type of worker or slave life form. And if you need more evidence about just how screwed up human beings and the way that we're designed is, there's a book. Humans Are Not From Earth, a scientific evaluation of the evidence. And if you do read that book, it's from Dr. Ellis Silver. It has to be the 2nd edition. It's much better and improved than the 1st edition, and he goes into answering critics in the 2nd edition that had questions or complaints about his 1st edition. So it's much more in depth. The point is that this book is so big and has so much information in it that I've only gotten about halfway through it, because I have to keep stopping, because he'll discuss something and sources for that information, and then I am pretty thorough, so I stop and go off and research that, and that could take weeks. So it's really a profound book, and the stuff in there is truly will shatter your view of humanity, and along with the other material I talked about in episode 11. So the point is that let's follow this in some kind of coherent fashion. If human beings are a result of genetic engineering by an unknown interference entity, And we were created specifically, I'm not a Sitchinite because I think he has several things wrong and creates his own mythology based on his own imaginings that were added into his translations of the Sumerian tablets. But there are ways for anybody to read these Sumerian tablets nowadays. I've read many different things from the Sumerians, and it's clear in their creation story. It makes a lot more. You can follow the progression between the Sumerians and then the Babylonians, and eventually, and how this information, how these stories get morphed, to eventually become part of the Bible, etc. And how these stories just keep changing and creating new and different religions. The point is that the furthest back you can go, probably the closer to elements of truth are in there. So humans are created to be blatant in the Sumerian tablets, a slave race. Let's just say that has some validity and truth. And when you take into consideration all the stuff in Dr. Silver's book, all the odd, strange behavior that humans have when it comes to forming associations with one another in societies, and how we keep doing this silly nonsense with fictional authority, tyranny, slavery under coercive theft, that's called taxation, and other means, arbitrary rules, all the nonsense that we have in the world. When you think about all that, and then you realize that it's probably not, how should I word this? It's probably the most logical way you can look at it is that the human brain was designed so that the human being, when a consciousness incarnates into a human being, that the human being can become easily coerced and enslaved and operate under an authority. So really, people like Passio, people like me, you out there, if you understand the depth of what I'm talking about, and how Earth is like a prison planet, and human beings are caught basically nets for conscious beings, non-physical spirits, to be caught up in a reincarnation trap here. And we may be an abandoned species that's running on autopilot. That's possible, right? And we've become like a giant cargo cult, creating our own fictional authority to replace the now, like the cosmic abandonment Passio talks about. Our original creators are no longer here. So we fill in the gap and create this fictional state that we operate under. Now, if that's the case, then none of the stuff that a lot of these freedom movement people are fighting for is going to get very far, primarily because they're not dealing with the base problem. Before dealing with the dark occult that actually run the world, before you deal with all the other stuff that you have to deal with, the fact of the matter is, if you actually wanted to free human beings, you have to deal with the fact that we are built to be easily tricked, to be enslaved. Think of the insanity of the way people think when it comes to society versus how we think when we do other things in life. Literally insane, repeating the same thing over and over again, not being able to grasp simple concepts. I mean, it's really not hard to understand. I mean, if you can't see like taxation is theft, or how as Larkin Rose's most dangerous superstition, we really behave like no different than primitive people who would throw somebody into a volcano to appease the volcano god, right? So the problem is that in order to address this problem, you really have to, all those biases I talked about, which were just the tip of the iceberg in the previous podcast, I mean, you really need to address that. And I know that people are starting to. Larkin Rose has his project with the mirror and his Candlelights project. And that is to try to bypass the firewalls that people put up with all these erroneous beliefs and nonsense that people believe in. But think about all the ridiculous stuff people think about is real, and yet we're capable of being real in other places in life, just not when it comes to this stuff. Almost like our brains are, and I would say it's not almost like, it is like we are our brain is designed to interfere with our consciousness in a certain way. And people like Larkin Rose, Passio, others, you out there, if you happen to know what I'm talking about and understand what I'm talking about, we are the anomalies. Remember, human beings are not really well designed. If you read Humans Are Not From Earth, or think about all the problems human beings have interacting with the nature that we are surrounded with in the physical realm here, there really is a big problem with our physicality. We're just like a poorly engineered being. And these creatures, deities, entities, aliens, whatever they were, they did a crappy job on us. And they seem most focused in designing us to be enslaved. So you'd have to hack that system in the human brain that causes that. You have to bypass all that. Think about this. Seriously. 7 billion people on the planet. The masses outnumber the controllers. Millions and millions to one. And yet, even though human beings are not sheep, we behave like we are, but we're not. We're capable of doing great things and self-governing ourselves because our consciousness, the spirit, is not a slave. It just incarnates into a human being and then believes it is and has amnesia. This is a big problem. See, I don't see people coming up with a way to innovate so that you can bypass all this stuff for the masses. In reality, the controllers are controlling us kind of like a lion tamer controls a lion. The lion only really thinks he's being controlled. If he wanted to, he could just swat the lion tamer. All people would have to do is say no en masse to whatever nonsense, arbitrary rules and regulations we're subjected to. When you think about the nonsense of being in one imaginary place because of an imaginary boundary, like in the United States, you could literally be in one state, which is an imaginary place, cross over an imaginary line, enter a different state, and whatever you had with you that was legal in the one makes you a criminal in the other one. It's insane. That is literal insanity. If you are a human being that's the same human in one place as you are in another place, clearly arbitrary rules that are not... Okay, if you have natural law and you write down rules based on natural law, it's kind of redundant, but hey, that may make sense for people that don't grasp natural law so that they can understand it. But if you make rules that are not consistent with natural law, then you're making these arbitrary rules. We're all saying that we're basically admitting to being enslaved, right? That's the whole point. So my point is that this is where I differ from Passio. I focus on the afterlife because I don't see anyone addressing the main problem, which is the flaw in human design, that we're designed to be essentially a slave species. And think about it, right? If you understand the interference theory, as Passio has perfectly explained in some of his presentations, that he understands it. If we're interfered with, how is it not consistent that the interferers made us so that we could be controlled? And if that is a, on our point of view, a flaw in our design, because it keeps us from being free, and it certainly was a benefit to the designers who did not want a free species. They wanted a species that they could rule for whatever reason for a time, and then they either left or now rule us from a non-physical domain. And dark occultists are the tip of the iceberg of their control in the physical world. Then you're dealing with some serious shit that needs to be addressed, and that's where I have a issue, because you can get so much valuable information from people like David Icke and Passio if you're new to this information. If you're willing to take the time to, listen, read, research. But then when it comes down to processing that information and making it something useful, I just don't see what is going on in the physical earth with physical humans being resolved in any way, because people don't even want to address the base problem, our mental design. And then you have this technocracy from these truly evil technocrats that are trying to now regain control of the internet. They let the information bandwagon go on for a time, and I think the reason was because they were creating a giant spy apparatus, which is now fully up and running with 5G almost here. And now they want to regain control of the free speech. They don't want us to talk about this stuff. Too dangerous. To allow the slaves to, know what's going on. So the controllers, these sickos in the technocracy world, they want to censor, they want to regulate, they want to manipulate, and they do a great job. I mean, we live in, I also agree with Passio when he talks about the apocalypse already happened. Most people don't even understand the word apocalypse. It really means a revelation, to reveal. They think it means the end of the world. That's not what it means. The apocalypse for humanity began with the Age of Information in 1995, and it's been going on ever since, where just about every human on the planet has access virtually to all information. And now in the palm of their hands from their smartphones. And without all that information, most people don't do what I've done or what you're doing. Many of you who listen to me, I can tell from your comments, you are fully up to speed on a lot of this information, and you do a lot of research. But you're just a tiny, tiny fraction of the human population. Most people are ignorant fools when it comes to this stuff. They may be a genius somewhere else, but when it comes to understanding humanity and our suffering under tyranny and slavery, they're completely clueless. And really ignorant ass-tards out there. Stupid atheists, religious tards. I mean, it's never ending, the amount of people and the masses allow the enslavers to control us all, because they're too stupid to research, too ignorant because they ignore all the information that they have available to them. So they're the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the people. I mean, take a look at what's going on in Hong Kong right now. So in Hong Kong, there's a pretty big revolt going on there against China, but I'm sure the Chi-Coms will eventually figure out a way to suppress it because it really people won't say no long enough, and plus they're constantly under manipulation. They're manipulating the social media. They manipulate the news. Information is constantly being used to try to control you because it's distorted. They feed lies out to everybody. People believe in the most ridiculous nonsense. And when you learn the truth, you find out it's even stranger than fiction. So this is my part 2 because I really wanted to address this one divergent point, and I hope I'm making it clear enough. And let me just say it one more time. If humans are a creation of an entity that interfered with normal life here, took DNA from life on the planet, mixed it with their own or some other source DNA, and created a human being for the purpose of being a servant or a slave to dig gold or whatever it is they were doing in ancient times, and then left after they got what they wanted, or at least no longer stuck around in the physical plane, whatever they did to us is a problem because we are clearly designed, if you understand the interference theory, we are designed to be like this. So everybody in the freedom movement, Passio's all pissed off lately because a lot of these people in the freedom movement are also assholes who don't understand the big picture, or they think they can that they can have freedom without even understanding human consciousness. And I completely get his frustration. He's right. He is right. These people are clueless assholes. So I just want to say that the problem can only be solved in the physical human form when we finally figure out who did what to us, how it was done, and how it can be mitigated so that people stop having things like the backfire effect. They stop having cognitive dissonance, cognitive biases that imprison the consciousness in the human body into thinking ridiculous nonsense. So, not as long as my last podcast, but like I said, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you got to listen to episode 11. You should listen to a whole bunch of other stuff. Check out my website, OverwatchProject.com, for more. Check out Passio's work on his YouTube channel at Mark Passio and What on Earth is Happening. Check out David Icke. Check out Matt from Quantum of Consciousness. Check out so many other sources in my OverwatchProject.com. There is an entire list of links that can lead you to many more pieces of information. And, I hope you do your own research. Because I'm not spoon feeding you knowledge. I'm just having a discussion with hopefully people that are getting informed or are informed and bouncing ideas out there. So thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good night, good day, whatever time you happen to be listening to this, and be looking forward to your feedback. See ya. Bye.